There always seems to be either too much or not enough. In the latest water crisis, it's a shortage, affecting 4 Dublin local authorities, as well as parts of Wicklow, Meath and Kildare. Production problems at the treatment plant in Ballymore Eustace are to blame, in particular the water itself. Experts say the chemical composition has changed, probably due to the weather, which means normal treatment to remove sludge isn't working. 15 years ago, Ashish Dhawan opened this restaurant in central Dublin. He's got 5 others across 4 Dublin local authorities affected by water restrictions.
What if I've got 140 people out there? There's a web summit on. We're completely booked out tonight. I don't know, but if somebody walks in at 10:30 and I just tell them, sorry, sir, I have the food for you, but I have no water to get you to wash your hands with. It's a pretty sort of dire reflection of the city that we live in.
With a turnover of €6 million a year, the Jaipur Group has built its reputation on good food and service. But it's not worth anything if the toilets aren't working.
I think it's pretty unacceptable. Water is a part of my rates. I pay my rates on time. I should get a service. It's very, very simple. And if it's not being done, they can give me any excuses under the sun. I'm not going to be satisfied. There are times when we flush the toilets with, mineral water, or given bottles for them. And it's like being prehistoric out here. We might host the best 6 companies in the world, but we don't have water.
And in the past 2 years, the restaurant has simply had to shut. There have been 9 occasions when the water supply has stopped for more than 24 hours, and that affects 2 sittings in a restaurant. Experts say that the problem with the supply to the capital is that the water is behaving differently. In other words, it's a chemical problem. The supply hasn't been poisoned by E. coli or cryptosporidium, or even leaked away, along with 41% of our treated water. But the fact remains, there's very little spare capacity in the system.
It's something we've learned to trust and harness through our knowledge, hands and hard work. It's shaped who we are and who we can become. But as demand rises, we have less to spare.
But there is a plan for a brave new world for water, or at least for a new semi-state company to run it. And despite the fact that it will have the most captive of markets, it's been vigorously advertising itself across the airwaves. Established last March, Irish Water will take over the responsibility for the provision of water and wastewater treatment from 34 local authorities on a phased basis from next January. It will take 5 years to complete the takeover, after which the regulated company will also be responsible for all water services and making capital and investment decisions regarding the country's water infrastructure. But what businesses and residents who are without water tonight will want to know is, will this all really deliver the high-quality, reliable service that very soon we'll all be paying for?
That report from Tanya Silham. Well, I'm joined in studio now by Jerry Grant, Head of Asset Management at Irish Water, and Frank MacDonald, Environment Editor of the Irish Times. Now, Jerry Grant, if I could go to you first. Now, you're meant to be up and running fully in January. At what stage do you take responsibility for situations like the one that's happening in Dublin at the moment?
Well, from the establishment of Irish Water, which we expect to happen in January, we will be responsible. We will be the body responsible for delivering water services and wastewater services across the country. And we are putting in a huge effort to realise the capability within Irish Water to be able to do that. Clearly working with the local authorities in a partnership arrangement, but leveraging the strength of a singular organisation, particularly focused on the underinvestment that's taken place, the fact that we have to generate a sustainable revenue stream, the fact that we have to leverage that revenue stream in order to deliver.
We'll get to those longer term and important issues. But supposing you're faced with the situation like what the Dublin authorities are faced with at the moment, what would you be doing that would be any different?
Well, first of all, the Dublin authorities, I think are doing a very good job in the face of great difficulty. In fact, the Greater Dublin area has had enormous economic growth, and they've done a tremendous job to leverage the capacity of the River Liffey primarily to meet that demand over the last 30 or 40 years. The reality is Dublin is working on the basis of 1 to 2% margin. I think that has been explained many times. That's not the situation that you should be in. I think the intro demonstrated how complex the business of treating water is and making it available in drinking water standards.
Sure, but would you be doing anything different than what the Dublin authorities are doing now?
Our intention is to develop an investment plan which targets achieving at least a 15% margin in water supplies, not just in Dublin but across the country. We need to be in a position where we can deal with process interruptions and process difficulties, because these things happen, and we're dealing with a natural commodity in raw water. It's affected by what's happening in the catchments, and from time to time you're bound to have some process difficulties.
Frank MacDonald, do you think consumers will really notice any difference when Irish Water takes over?
Well, I hope they would. I mean, first of all, I think it needs to be said that Dublin is unique among capital cities in Europe in having such a low margin of spare capacity. Most other cities would have up to 20% spare capacity, so that when problems arise, they can still continue on supplying water, providing the problem is not a health-related one. But I mean, it has to be remembered that, water, okay, we think of Ireland as having loads and loads of water. It falls out of the sky every day nearly. But the truth of the matter is that that's just raw water. The water then has to be treated. We also have to deal with sewage and treat that as well. So, all of that will require money. And a huge new revenue stream will be the water rates that we're going to have to start paying, I think, from next year onwards. And I think it's very ironic that just at the point at which water rates are finally being introduced, which in my view are completely justified, the responsibility for water is being whipped off the local authorities and transferred to a new semi-state company in a further move to centralise an already highly centralised state.
Why is that not a good idea, given that the record of local authorities in managing those water assets is at best patchy?
Well, I think that you have to look at it in context. I mean, Jerry referred to the history of underinvestment. There has been a history of underinvestment. And there's a whole lot of plans that exist that haven't actually been implemented because there wasn't the money to pay for them. And I think that obviously one of the major things that Irish Water is going to have to fast track now is basically the plan, which has been kicking around now for the last 8 years or so, to take water from the River Shannon and bring it to Dublin. Now, that sounds like a smash and grab raid by the capital on another part of rural Ireland. But in fact, it isn't really, because what would happen is the water would be siphoned out of the Shannon, taken to a reservoir in the Midlands, and then from there transferred to Dublin to the treatment plant. That's
a big project, and we'll get to that in a minute. But if I could just go back to the restaurateur in Tanya Sillam's report, there's been a lot of talk about compensation for water users who experience a problem in their supply. Does Irish Water have any worked out policy when you'll be running as a commercial company? What will you say to business owners when, for whatever reason in the future, the water supply isn't there, and indeed to homeowners who are going to be paying water charges?
Well, first of all, of course, we're acutely conscious of the consumers of water, and again, the criticality of water to everyday life and to all kinds of activities is eminently clear.
Will you be giving them compensation if the water is not delivered?
First of all, the important thing for us is to have a secure revenue stream. The regulator, the CER, will have a very strict regime of supervision on us, and we'll certainly make sure that we meet certain service standards, and will certainly take money from us if we don't meet those standards. In the first instance,
is that a yes then?
It's a matter for the regulator ultimately as to how that protection to the consumer is catered for. But the really important point is that we have a secure, sustainable and adequate revenue stream to leverage the investment we need. The major scheme for Dublin has been talked about, but we have much more than that to do.
So where is the money going to come from?
Well, clearly, as I said, we have to establish a revenue stream. I would refer to some of the comments that Frank made in relation to the local authorities, and to make the point that it is clear that it is not possible to finance all the things that need to be done on an authority by authority basis. We must have a national asset management based approach.
So what does that mean? Does that mean you're going to borrow money? Because presumably you're not going to get all of the investment you need from the water rates that are coming in, or the water charges.
No. We have a significant deficit to make up. We have to understand the risks, and clearly there are risks, the unacceptable levels of risk of failure in both water supply and wastewater. We have to understand those. We have to stretch the revenues that will be available to us to do the most we can across the country, so that everybody has an equal chance of having an acceptable water supply and wastewater. But yes, we will have to borrow money, and we can only do that credibly when we have first of all, an organisation that's seen to be in control of the service, that's seen to know what it's about, and has a secure revenue base on which to leverage that borrowing.
Frank MacDonald, is that the advantage of Irish Water, that you have this big organisation that has, you know, some punching power, that it can borrow in ways that the local authorities couldn't? Would you accept that it's a good idea from that point of view?
I think that that's fundamentally the reason why it's being set up, is to provide an organisation into which, you know, money can be funneled through public-private partnership schemes and other stuff like that. I mean, for example, that idea of taking water from the Shannon to Dublin is clearly a big PPP project possibility. And that's the most likely way in which it will be procured. So it will be procured, in effect, at no expense to the state, to the exchequer. It will be procured on the basis of private sector investment, but with the control over the asset being maintained by a semi-state company, Irish Water.
If I could just ask you, Jerry, just specifically on that project, is it going to happen, and is it going to happen within the 10-year time frame? The Minister of the Environment was on the news at 1 today saying that he thought that was it had to be done within that time frame, and that any talk to the contrary wasn't good enough. Is it going to happen
Absolutely.
within that time frame?
Our Irish Water Management team is absolutely committed to delivering that project in the shortest possible time. It is a very complex project.
So it will be done within the next 10 years?
I believe so, and I should say in the meantime, we're not waiting for that project to deal with the situation. We have many initiatives to deliver.
I'm sure
in terms of leakage control and all the other things that need to be done.
Those glossy TV ads, how much did they cost?
I have no idea, but they're part of the project of converting the consumers of water in Ireland to customers. I think we have a very real difficulty, and I find it all the time.
You don't think people will be very keenly aware that they're going to be paying water charges next year? They might get a little bit irate seeing these ads for water on a night when they can't even make a cup of tea.
I think there's an incredibly important message that we have to deliver, that Irish Water is on the pitch to serve the people of Ireland and to deliver for them now and into the future. We expect, you know, recovery in the Irish economy. We know from experience that when recovery comes, demand for water will grow. We must be able to meet that, and we have the raw water resources to do that.
Finally, and very briefly, Frank, are you convinced will Irish Water work?
I think it may work, but I think that if people are going to be paying water charges for the water, they will want to be supplied with water, and they won't be prepared to accept any excuse for not supplying it.
Frank and Jerry,